Hello, I'm Mark, and this is the Fast Track Impact podcast for researchers who want to be more productive and achieve real-world impacts from their research. This week I am with Rosie Neumann, who is a PhD student working with me at Newcastle University, focusing on science policy networks and how it is that we go about communicating, ideally more effectively, with people from the policy community. So this week we're going to be thinking in some depth, based on her research, about what you can do to communicate far more effectively with the little time you have with whoever you need to communicate with. Her research is clearly focused on policy stakeholders, but this is already a very diverse bunch. So we're going to think more broadly about what you can do to communicate your evidence so it reaches the right people at the right time in the right way to ideally make a difference. Rosie, tell us a little bit more about yourself and your research and what brought you to this PhD.
It's really exciting to be here again. I've been in the podcast once before, and it's great to share some insights of my PhD, given that I'm just at the edge of submitting. That's a very exciting part, and it's kind of like really celebrating this milestone with everyone and giving you a little sneak preview of what I found out. So, maybe as you just said, just a little bit of a background of why I actually done this in the first place. So I have been working as a knowledge broker before for the German science policy platform, biodiversity platform. So matter of fact, I am a conservation geek. However, I got really interested in science communication, and most of the things that I've found out can be applied through many more disciplines. And just to give you one of the findings straight away is interdisciplinarity is a key thing. We gotta involve multiple stakeholders from all sorts of fields. Science is one, but there are so many policy sectors that need to be involved, and as well as public and everything. So stay tuned for more details.
Fantastic. So there's lots of things that we can say, you can say from experience, working professionally with this group over many years. But I think the value of this is the empirical data that is behind this, and some of the novel findings that have come out of your research. So tell us a little bit about the questions that you're asking and the methods that you're using, just so we can orient ourselves and get a sense of the context in which you're working.
Yeah, already I started to use a interdisciplinary mixed method approach. So I have taken 2 case studies, and I studied them in depth using multiple methods, including a Bayesian network analysis. I'm also using stakeholder network analysis, using a questionnaire, and and of course backing that up with literature. And this is kind of an approach that includes qualitative as well as quantitative information. So that's just the basics for the start.
Great. So you've got a bunch of interviews in there and some focus groups, and I got to sit in on one of those focus groups, which was nice, and a real live policy context in a part of, I guess it's climate policy broadly. So give us a sense of some of the key findings that have emerged from this then. What are the lessons that for you are most interesting?
Maybe we need to go back and really place it with the topic that I've chosen. The case study topic that I've chosen is on peatlands. Given that I am a conservation geek, I was okay, which ecosystem do I want to apply this kind of science communication PhD topic about? And there are 2 topics that kind of came to my head straight away, and I'm very interested in ocean topic. As well as peatlands. So given that Leipzig, where I come from, where I'm based, is not necessarily close to the ocean, I decided, okay, it's going to be peatland. I've got a number of people that I can connect with from my previous studies and previous work. So and peatlands, I must say, are really, really important for the climate as well as for biodiversity. So there's not only a climate context, but it's going to be climate as well as biodiversity significance. And peatlands are just magic in terms of storing a an impressive amount of carbon really efficiently. So every hectare of peatland will always being intact and full of water, this is how a peatland should be, then it's going to store more carbon than the same size of a forest, matter of fact. So, yeah, and it's not well known, so I'm very happy to make this topic also a bit more, famous, let's say it that way, get it out there. But I think your question was about...
Yeah, just to add on to that, so I'm up for making peatlands famous. We all need to know where our peatlands are. There was a survey done in Scotland that asked people where are you most and least likely to visit, and the second least likely place that they would visit, second only to derelict land, was a peat bog, despite the fact that the number one place people wanted to visit was mountains, and you have to walk over a peat bog to get to a mountain, but we don't even realise. So we shouldn't enthuse for too long, because the two of us could get on a bit of a vibe here, has to be said. But I think what is interesting about this as a context is this is a highly contested policy context. So first of all, it's climate change policy. So depending on your views on such things, this is potentially controversial. But in particular, there has been a lack of policy action in this particular area for many decades based on a conflicted evidence base. So we had two different groups of people, one saying that restoring peat bogs was good for the climate, another bunch of people on the basis of other data over different timelines saying it's bad for the climate. And as a result of that conflicted evidence base, policy stasis. And so going into that, you then are working with two groups that for the first time in Germany and in the UK have managed to break that deadlock and work out, right, this is as far as the evidence can take us, so let's actually go out and do something and design a policy mechanism, a very similar mechanism in both cases that can enable us to actually restore some of these important habitats and manage them more sustainably. So this is not a walk in the park. This is a really challenging, contested area, which is one of the reasons why, for me, this is such a useful and interesting context to examine.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, the aim of the thesis is really to break down how does the communication network is kind of structured. So I looked at two case studies very closely, and both of the case studies include actors from both the policy side as well as the research side, and also additional actors that are kind of placed within the NGO area, as well as like even companies, water companies. And this is quite a unique thing. And what I wanted to find out is whether or not, they transfer knowledge to each other, and ideally leading to decision being made based on the communication each of the actors had with each other. So that's kind of part of the social network analysis that I've done. And maybe we dive into that. Well, yeah. All right. Like in terms of the social network analysis, one of the really amazing findings was like maybe to start with, not everyone knew each other. I thought it was a given. So if you want to communicate and try to influence each other in a way to make decisions, then you got to know each other, which wasn't the case. So I actually had to add a specific network of who actually knows each other. And the second, I've done several networks, and the next one was like kind of who transferred knowledge to whom in the network, followed by who received it. So they were kind of two different things, and trying to go into who kind of the one-way communication, but also kind of leading what is the difference between dialogue in the first place. So I've also asked whether or not the stakeholders had the dialogue between each other, and like kind of the last network that I've asked, kind of derived from the research was whether or not people made decisions based on a communication between each other. And just about the background, the really important thing coming from this is really you gotta make sure that the message that you get across is actually received by the stakeholder. by the other person. And this is like really linking up to whether or not they make decisions. So if they don't feel like they actually received any information from the other person, it's less likely that they make decisions based on it. It is a kind of a no-brainer. However, most people don't make sure that the message gets across, and this is kind of one thing that we can start with in our communication strategy. Each of us, doesn't matter with what stakeholder we are talking about and what we are targeting at, but this is like really get yourself into the shoes of the target audience and make sure that it gets across. And I mean, one thing that you can do is like having a dialogue with them. So making sure you know them in the first place and they know you, and then getting into a dialogue. Because if you're gonna have a dialogue, then it's more of a certainty that you kind of understand each other and make sure that you actually understood, and you can also listen to what the needs are from the other side. So yeah, I'm sure we can add on this throughout the interview.
Yeah, so the key thing to note here is that there are researchers in both of these networks. So you would think, as you said, that these are researchers who are officially part of these groups. They're on technical groups, they're on advisory groups, they are embedded within these networks. And yet you discover that not everyone knows each other. And you've treated the researchers equally to all of the other stakeholders. So it's not just how do researchers exchange knowledge with these other stakeholders, it's how do they exchange knowledge with each other as well. And so yeah, ask yourself, well, just because I am in this particular group, I'm on this email list, I'm on this advisory board or whatever, actually, do people feel like they know me? If asked, would people say, yeah, I know this person? And in particular, would they say that they trusted you? And that's a step even beyond just, I know this person. And I think that there's a really important point about has the person received that knowledge? Because I think so often we tick the box when we've done dissemination, and I see so many project reports and even impact case studies where people say, well, we disseminated it, we put it out to all these people, and we can look at these incredible numbers, it's been disseminated so widely. But unless I know that somebody received that and actually understood it, then that dissemination means nothing. And even just saying, yeah, I received it is only part of the picture, because maybe I receive it, but maybe actually what I understood is completely different.
Yeah, totally true. And if we can go a bit deeper into like the factors that can enable and improve the communication between the stakeholders and increase the likelihood for decision making. And this is kind of part of the Bayesian network analysis that I've done, which means that I looked at factors on how often they communicate, how long do they know each other, what modes of communication they're using, and how useful they find it. So one of the things is like I have this kind of as-is kind of scenario, which I compare the other ones with, and I'm trying to find the optimal scenario of how to improve it. Which means like if you already have like a communication frequency of once a year, it improved up, and the probability for decision making improved compared to the baseline scenario. And obviously the best kind of correlation with the decision making probability was with when you communicate weekly. However, there's like a really cool optimal if you communicate like on a quarterly basis. So that's something I've really, really appreciated to kind of as a finding. And there's a correlation of whether or not you communicate in person or if you communicate via email and via phone. So a phone obviously doesn't seem to be important for some people, but there's this frequently communication used done via email, surely. But there's certainly an advantage of using in-personal direct dialogue communication. And I think that's kind of a little bit of a summary of the Bayesian network analysis. Do you got anything to add?
Yeah, so just reflecting on that, you may be sitting there thinking, well, that's not realistic. I certainly can't do once a week. But that kind of scenario where, once a quarter is good enough, and that's still going to make a difference, that is, I think, encouraging. And the same with face-to-face. Maybe I can't do that on a regular basis, but let's, on the basis of this, try and make the effort once in a while to actually look someone in the eyeballs. And you do get that sense, just experientially, that I trust you, you trust me. And it's so much easier to build trust and relationship when you are face-to-face. So let's not be maybe too idealistic, but it gives us a goal, and let's just try and push our practice increasingly towards what your evidence suggests works.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really want to go a little bit deeper into the trust issue, how to build a trust, and if the data is kind of interpreted correctly, and it really suggests that there is trust development over time. So if we believe that a trust actually can be a legitimate proxy for kind of decision making, you can actually look at, there's an initial trust that you've been given to the person opposite you, and then you gotta have to prove your trustworthiness in actually the year between 1 and 5 years. And so it's a long-term project. I've been looking at a relationship that lasted less than a year, and up to like 27 years. And this is kind of how I kind of got these results from the interpretation of the results. So doesn't seem to be any plateau of like increasing trust over time, at least not until the longest relationship of 27 years. It's kind of still increasing in terms of the probability to make decisions based on the relationship and the communication with that person. So it is a long-term project. So you got to invest in that relationship, and you be aware that you've been given this trust at the very beginning, and you got to prove it, and you got to prove it in regular exchange. So quarterly is certainly an advice that I can give you from the research.
So just to clarify on the 1 to 5 years, is this that less than 1 year, you're unlikely to be viewed as highly trusted, but between 1 and 5 years, this is the kind of the window within which most people get to the place where, I trust that person, and I've known them in that kind of region. And it's not that it then stops at that point; it carries on. But you're looking to be in this game for at least 1 to 5. But of course, the longer the better. Is that a fair interpretation?
Yeah, I think so. Maybe just a little slight difference on my interpretation is like, you have, it doesn't take like a year to have given this initial trust. I mean, trust can be broken like in an instant, and it's very difficult to kind of regain it. So it is the kind of this constant communication that you have to kind of fulfill in order to do so. At least that's what I figure from the research. So I'm happy to be proven wrong, or kind of expanding on how that, and it is kind of early signs from the research. So there's gonna be some more on this front. So I'm looking forward to more trust research, and get back to me if the results that you might have from your research. I would be super keen. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've got a project at the moment where we're looking at the role of trust in how people learn, communicate with each other, and potentially generate impact. So lots more discussions to be had on that. And I think just intrinsically we know that trust builds over time, and yet it can be broken in an instant. And I think for me the lesson there is that I'm a risk taker. have a habit of biting off more than I can chew sometimes, and putting myself out there because I want to make a difference. And actually, where that risk is to potentially destroy people's trust in me, then I need to just go carefully here, because one risk too far may then ruin my credibility with that group, and limit what I can do in terms of impact for many years to come.
Yeah, on this front, what maybe like a recommendation that I can already give at this point is you don't need to do everything yourself. So there are those professional science communicators, knowledge brokers who can kind of help to facilitate this dialogue between you and the policymakers. So make use of that. That's certainly a really important thing. Being a researcher, like everyone has like amazing expertise and knowledge, but you don't have to be like a born science communicator straight away. So I mean that's why they're out there, and make use of those. And all of us, all of the stakeholders involved in solving today's really environmental problems, climate problems, everyone has like a unique set of values and beliefs in the background and reasons why they believe what they do, and maybe not believe in other things, and maybe there are good reasons why they are climate deniers. We got to listen to each other, and those kind of intermediaries, knowledge brokers, they usually have like really good facilitation skills and mediation skills. So I'm a trained mediator, which means that one of the things that I love to do, what I've already done and love to do more in the future, is trying to get stakeholders together and finding a common language between all of the relevant stakeholders present to solve the problems, but also to help to mediate the different conflicts that might arise, given that there are those different beliefs and values behind everyone's viewpoint. And it's just a matter of fact, and we don't need to kind of fight against it. It's just a matter of like, how can we create this open atmosphere that we can work together like really, really productively and efficiently and respectfully. Respect is certainly a really important factor for science communication. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. I have the same take-home message from some of my own research on participation. So the one-sentence version of a bunch of my papers, one-sentence version of your thesis, is get yourself a professional facilitator, because you can come up with all these evidence-based principles, and I've done in some of my own research, to do this yourself. But ultimately the shortcut to this is get someone who actually already knows this evidence, or through their own experience has come up with something akin to that evidence from their experience. So for some of us that's within reach. We can afford that. We can plan for it. For others, that's not so within reach. But ask yourself, who are the people in your network? Is there someone in your research group? Do you have a PhD student like Rosie who has some unique skills that you might be able to persuade her to lend you for a day? So there are people in our networks, in our institutions, and even if it's just that they've got more emotional intelligence than us, draw on their experience and that intelligence and get some help, and that can go a very long way. But for those of you listening to this who are trying to hone your skills, I think there's a specificity to some of these findings that I think is really useful.
Yeah, maybe the last thing I really like to share are like insights of the policymaker's perspective. Like my initial literature review showed that this hasn't been really looked at. So one of the aims with the questionnaire was to shed light into international policymakers' perspective. And I've got like some really cool results from this. And, it just really shows every person is unique. Everyone has own needs and own priorities. However, there are some things that lots of them had had in common in terms of themes that emerged. And, maybe like there is this minority of people who would would be happy to just receive some results from the research at the end of the project, and they are fine with like this one-way communication. However, it's always good to kind of give them some idea when and what to expect at what point, so they kind of already merge the research cycle with the policy cycle. However, there's the majority of policymakers who would be also happy to co-produce the knowledge from the start. So there is this kind of this need, and the policymakers are actually looking forward to work with researchers more closely together. And this can be from the outset of the research project. So if you happen to kind of plan a big research project, trying to get the stakeholders on board as soon as you can, and then even co-produce the research questions. So at this very point, you can already make sure that this is aligned with everyone's needs and with everyone kind of resources as well. So is that like really helpful and applicable for the policy side, like what you wanting to achieve with the research project? And is that kind of feasible for you to achieve in the given time with the given resources that you've got? So if you already do that at the beginning, I mean, God, that's an awesome start. And if you're already right into the research project, that it's never too late to start. So there's always a chance to kind of get stakeholders on board at any given time during the research project. So it's always good to kind of do a good stakeholder analysis and get them involved and build kind of a more or less sophisticated engagement strategy, and kind of really make it targeted to exactly the person you're looking at. So it's not about only grouping the target audience, but making sure that it really gets there. So put yourself in the shoes of whoever you're deciding to target it. And so how do they, get up in the morning? When do they read their newspaper? And maybe it's already a good time to get them on board. Maybe it's the time when they commute to work and they are like super keen on Twitter. That's a good one. And maybe it's going to be like an evening meeting where it's like more informal. And talking about informal, it's not only about exchanging on like really sophisticated research. You gotta have this relationship with those stakeholders, and this is often based on informal exchange. So take the time and just discuss that at the very beginning. Don't dive into like, oh, those are the 5 main points of my research, but just create this relationship in the first place, and that's kind of it's to do with exchanging things about maybe even your family, if you're okay with that, or you're like kind of like, where are you from? And then it's so easy to kind of have a connection. And I mean, maybe just an example from my side. I've been part of the IPBES delegates, so the big international governmental platform for biodiversity and ecosystem services that just published this massive global biodiversity assessment. And you're kind of meeting up with stakeholders and delegates from all over the world, and including New Zealand. So I have spent considerable time of my life in New Zealand, and I am very passionate about the wildlife over there and many things more that I connect with New Zealand. And it's just it doesn't take 5 minutes to go and have like a small talk and chat with the New Zealand delegate and kind of get their card and get an invitation to go and contact them when you're over in New Zealand. It's just like something that you start your communication with, and at some point, maybe even after this small talk, at the second meeting, then it's time when you build this trusting relationship that you can get your message across, and to kind of build like similarities, and maybe that's just kind of getting a little bit into like this. We're more likely to take on board messages from people that are like us. I mean, I can give you the sophisticated word called homophily. But if we really want to have innovative ideas to tackle our problems, we're also going to take on board like people with ideas and beliefs and that are different from us. So I think I'm doing a little loop here, but hopefully you're still with me. Yeah.
Brilliant, I'm loving it. And I'm getting to get to go to New Zealand for the first time this summer. I'm doing some impact training out there, so I'm looking forward to making some connections. I think the critique that I sometimes hear on this is, well, are you providing the policy community with opportunities to bias or hijack research for their own ends? And certainly the experience that I've had and the stuff coming out of your PhD research is that there is genuine interest in helping to shape the research to make it as relevant as possible. And yeah, you get the findings you get, and you have the right to publish them, whether or not that is quite ideologically where they would have liked it to have gone. But give us that chance to have that chat early on and shape the questions so that they are at least relevant to us, whether they go the way we might want them to or not. And I think you have to have your wits about you. There will be people who may want to abuse your findings, cherry pick, distort, and such like. But ultimately, that relational approach, building trust, you get a sense of who these people are, and in the same way that they're judging whether they can trust you, you're judging whether you can trust them. You mentioned stakeholder analysis, so if you're interested to do that, there are other approaches and tools out there, but Fast Track Impact, go to the resources page and look for templates, and you'll see the stakeholder analysis template and the research impact planning template, if you want to then follow Rose's advice. This is about making those connections, making them as deeply and as long-lasting as possible. Rosie, thank you for your time, and good luck with the very final stages of writing this up. I'm so excited. We're so close.
It's really exciting. So I'm hope if anyone wants to have like the finished thesis, I'm happy to send it out and discuss it, because I'm sure like it's just one stage in the research process of getting more evidence on how we can improve the science communication. So I would be really keen to be in touch and discuss things further and do some follow-ups maybe. And your Twitter handle, if people want to talk to you on Twitter, do you remember it? Yes, of course I know my Twitter handle. It's Rosemarie Katrin. I think Mark is going to link it somehow, and then we can follow up there. I'm quite active on Twitter. I'm also on LinkedIn, and yeah. And of course, I think I'm allowed to say that. I have, besides my PhD, I've started my own company called Impact Dialogue, and doing exactly what I'm kind of experienced in the past, what I'm working at, including my research and getting that into practice. So I'm training researchers. I'm happy to do a more stakeholder analysis. I'm happy to do coaching, and my ultimate goal would be to lead one of the outreach packages, communication packages of like a big EU project. So stay tuned if you get in touch if you think you want to discuss any of that a bit further. Yep. Fantastic. Put it out there and see what happens. That is the joy of social media, and it turns out this podcast as well. And I do have to say, I have thoroughly enjoyed working with you as a PhD student. Unusually, and this has never happened to me before, I doubt this has happened to anyone else listening to this, you actually came to me with your first year crowdfunded already of your PhD. And that says something about the entrepreneurial approach that you've taken throughout your PhD. And of course, alongside your PhD, if that wasn't hard enough, developing your own company. And this is already an active company. You're doing various things already in terms of knowledge brokerage, mediation, impact training, and such like. So I'll certainly be using your services in future, and I'm looking forward to the change in that relationship. That's going to be fun, and fingers crossed some other things come from people who listen to this as well.
I think in summary, this is a bunch of lessons about how we can communicate better. And I think, we've talked about policy, but it goes way beyond just the policy community. We need to think creatively about how we can engage more regularly. Time is limited, but can we make a priority for that small number of key individuals that we've identified perhaps through a stakeholder analysis as being particularly important, who have the ability to really affect change? And can we just keep those contacts warm and engage, ideally at least once a quarter, but if we can more, make time for face-to-face opportunities, even if it's not a one-to-one, just going to a place where you know that they are going to be and making those connections in the corridors, over coffee breaks and such like. And not taking it for granted that I put my stuff out there and it's going to make a difference. Well, actually, I need to know if people actually received it, and more than that, if they actually even understood it, or at least understood it in the way that I intended. And that may or may not be a problem, but depending on how they reinterpret this and the nature of your research. But we can't take anything for granted. Lots more besides. The role of trust, so important, but I'm going to leave it there. I think lots of food for thought, lots of things that are practical that we can apply in our own work with policy and other stakeholders. So go out there and enjoy engaging more effectively than ever before.
Enjoy is a good last word. Enjoy it. Enjoy the process, and do it together. Don't do it alone. We can always be more efficient if we work together. Thanks so much, and stay tuned. Have an awesome day.